Hello, it's Simon Zucchi here. In this property education video, I want to share with you information about the HMRC tax warning issued to UK landlords. This has been about hybrid company structures in their Spotlight 63 publication on the HMRC website. Now, this has sparked all sorts of responses from lots of different people, all with their own opinion, but some of them are completely wrong on what they're saying. I saw one video on YouTube from a supposed tax expert who was claiming that the only way to buy property now is as a cash buyer or do strategies such as service accommodation. Now, that's just complete rubbish, and I doubt that person even has any investment properties himself. This just goes to show you need to be very careful who you listen to, especially on social media, and especially when it comes to tax, which is a very personal and individual subject. You should always seek professional advice on your personal tax situation. Now, I am not qualified to give tax advice, so I don't give tax advice. What I like to do is educate people so they become aware of some of the questions they should ask their personal tax advisor. Now, one of the big problems faced by buy-to-let landlords right now is due to Section 24. Now, these changes were introduced back in April 2017 and they were phased over 4 years. But at the time, I remember it was rather confusing because different property tax specialists had very different views on what landlords should do because of this. Now, first of all, let's be very clear that tax specialists make a lot of money advising their clients how to legally minimize their tax by taking a full advantage of the tax laws. And after all, the tax laws are made by rich people in the first place, right? So wealthy people generally pay less tax in terms of pence per pound because they can afford the best tax advice. Now, it's also really important to clarify here the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. Tax evasion is illegal. It's where you deliberately attempt to avoid tax which is due. So you cannot do that. Tax avoidance is where you arrange one's financial affairs to minimize tax liability within the law. However, the problem is that many of these tax avoidance schemes and loopholes are actually shut down at some point by HMRC, or they just don't work in the first place. And so you have to pay taxes owed and also penalties to the tax man. Now, you often hear about footballers who've done these elaborate schemes to minimize their tax, and they end up having to pay tax and penalties to HMRC. So how does this affect you and your property investing, and what's all the big fuss that's being caused at the moment on social media? Well, if you own just one property which you rent out, HMRC sees that as a business. When you make profit in a business, you should pay tax on it, and that's obviously fair enough. But Section 24 is not fair. In fact, I would go as far as saying Section 24 actually discriminates against landlords. You see, in any other business, you can offset your expenses against the revenue which comes in, which reduces the profit on which you're going to pay tax. With Section 24, HMRC have said you can no longer offset all of the mortgage interest on your mortgages against your rental income, apart from a 20% marginal tax relief. Now, what this means is if you own property in your own name, which always used to be the way people used to own property, and if you have a mortgage, which the vast majority of investors do, and if you are a higher rate taxpayer, it means ultimately you're going to end up paying more tax. Now, if you're a lower rate taxpayer, the net effect is you don't pay any more tax. However, you might be pushed up into the higher rate bracket because of the way they calculate the tax you're going to pay. But if you are a higher rate taxpayer, it's going to have a huge effect on you. Now, for many years, people didn't really feel the true effect of Section 24 because it was phased in over 4 years from April 2017, and also the interest rates have been very, very low. But let's consider what's happening right now. Now, due to the recent interest rate hikes which happened over the last 18 months or so, there are many buy-to-let landlords whose monthly mortgage interest payments are higher than the actual rent that's coming in on that property. So what that means is they're not making any money. In fact, they're losing money every single month, often having to put money into their property just to cover the mortgage interest. However, due to the changes in the way that profit is now calculated on these buy-to-let properties, it means that although they are technically losing money, there's actually a phantom profit on which HMRC wants to charge tax. Now that sounds very unfair to me. And this is one of the many reasons why we are seeing so many landlords selling up their buy-to-let properties right now, which is another reason why we're seeing property prices falling, because there's lots of property coming onto the market and there's not as much demand right now. Now, if you own a property in a company, it's not affected by Section 24, which is why most people who are investing in buy-to-let property are now buying in a company structure. There are also strategies you can do where you maybe don't own property, you're actually making cash flow from it, such as rent to rent and Section 24, where you're not affected by that, although the landlord who owns the property is affected. And even if you do own property in your own name, you can do strategies such as serviced accommodation, which is seen as a business, and so that's not subject to Section 24 either. Now, there are always lots of people who are really happy to bash landlords, including the government, including the press, and there might be some people watching this video who watch lots of YouTube videos who are very anti-landlord, and they say, you know, landlords, they deserve to be paying lots of tax because they're stopping first-time buyers get on the property ladder. Well, whilst there might be a small element of truth in that, the reality is that landlords who've got bigger properties, such as houses of multiple occupation, HMOs, well, those types of houses are not the properties that first-time buyers are going to be buying. So they're not really taking any properties away from those first-time buyers. And if there weren't private landlords providing rental accommodation, there would be an even worse housing shortage crisis in the UK, and rents would be even higher than they were. So renters, be careful what you ask for, as we're seeing more and more landlords selling up, which is reducing the supply. What that means is that rents are going up, so be careful what you ask for. Now, this has all exploded very recently because in the last few weeks, a retired solicitor who's now a bit of a campaigner, a gentleman called Dan Neil, who's obviously a very smart solicitor, he wrote a blog all about two schemes by Property 118 and Less Tax for Landlords, which he claims do not work. Now, HMRC published their Spotlight 63 on their website. You can go and Google it, look it up yourself, and they are saying in that they agree that hybrid tax structures don't work. Now, interestingly, I think Property 118 are actually of this same opinion. They say, yeah, these hybrid structures don't work. So I'm not quite sure what Dan Needle is going on about there. And Less Tax for Landlords, they're very clear that they won't just set up schemes to avoid tax. It has to be part of operational and planning reasons, but there are also some tax benefits as well. So there's a big hoo-ha about this on social media. I think there might even be some defamation cases coming out by all the people who are publishing stuff around this who maybe don't really know what they're talking about, or making claims that aren't correct. And I think there are going to be some very interesting court cases coming up, and we're going to have to wait and see. So, as I said before, you've got to be really careful who you listen to, especially on social media and YouTube. I've been a landlord myself for the last 28 years, teaching people just like you how to become successful investors and replace their income for the last 20 years. But look, I don't know it all. I'm learning all the time. But I'm probably the only mentor in the UK who is actively investing and teaching other people during the last property market crash in 2008. So I know from personal experience exactly how you should be investing in this falling property market, whereas most of the other trainers out there, they're just making it up as they go along. So if you've enjoyed the content in this video, please do like it, do come and comment. I'll answer as many as I possibly can. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified whenever we bring a new video out. So until the next time, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. Thanks for watching. Hey, it's Simon here. I do hope you've just enjoyed that video on YouTube. I hope you took lots of notes, and more importantly, you're going to take action. And what I'd encourage you to do is click on the link in the description below the video. I've got some live online training that's very relevant to the video you've just watched. Come and register for that training, join me live online, and you can actually get your questions answered live as part of that training. So take the opportunity to come and join me live online, click on the link below and secure your spot before you miss the date. Take action right now. As ever, I encourage you to invest in knowledge, invest for skill. Enjoy the next video.